In a Brooklyn brownstone, a 72-year-old grandmother was about to discover betrayal disguised as birthday cake. What started as a perfect family celebration took a shocking turn when she came face to face with her daughter-in-law's cruelest, quote, joke. Annabelle Jones wasn't your typical retiree. For 40 years, she had been a pediatric oncology nurse, known for reading people with surgical precision. When she encountered Jessica's poisoned birthday cake, she had no idea she was walking into a war she was uniquely equipped to win. Annabelle made one devastating phone call that would destroy her son's marriage forever. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The afternoon light filtered through the lace curtains of Annabelle Jones's Brooklyn brownstone, casting delicate shadows across the mahogany dining table that had witnessed 43 years of family celebrations. Today marked her 70th birthday, and the house hummed with the careful orchestration of what appeared to be a perfect family gathering. "Mom, you look absolutely radiant," Michael said, adjusting his tie as he surveyed the dining room. At 38, he still carried himself with the earnest anxiety of someone perpetually seeking approval. Jessica really outdid herself with the decorations. Annabelle smiled, her fingers smoothing the silk blouse she'd chosen for the occasion. After 4 decades as a pediatric oncology nurse, she had learned to read the subtle signs others missed: the tension in a parent's shoulders, the forced brightness in a child's smile, the way people arranged their faces when they needed to hide something important. Today, she found herself cataloging those same tells in her own dining room. "She certainly has an eye for detail," Annabelle replied, noting how Jessica had positioned herself near the kitchen doorway, surveying her handiwork with the satisfaction of a general reviewing troops before battle. Jessica Miller-Jones moved through the space with practiced grace, her blonde hair swept into an elegant chignon that spoke of expensive salons and careful maintenance. Every element of the celebration bore her signature, from the precisely arranged white roses to the coordinated place settings that transformed Annabelle's warm, lived-in dining room into something that belonged in a magazine spread. "I just want everything to be perfect for Mom," Jessica said, her voice carrying the particular blend of affection and authority that she employed when speaking about Annabelle in her presence. 70 years deserves nothing less than perfection. The doorbell chimed, and Patricia Williams arrived with her characteristic warmth, carrying a bottle of wine and a small wrapped package. Pat had been Annabelle's neighbor for 15 years, their friendship forged during the long months of Robert's illness, when Pat would appear at her door with casseroles and quiet companionship. "Happy birthday, beautiful," Pat said, embracing Annabelle with genuine affection. Her presence immediately shifted the room's energy, bringing with it the comfort of unconditional friendship. Jessica's smile tightened almost imperceptibly as she watched the exchange. "Pat, how wonderful that you could make it. I was just telling Michael how important it is to have all of Mom's special people here." The phrase landed with subtle emphasis, all of Mom's special people, as if Pat's inclusion required Jessica's explicit approval. Pat, who had held Annabelle's hand through Robert's final hours, who had helped pack away his belongings when grief made the task impossible, was being positioned as a guest in a celebration she had helped plan. "Wouldn't miss it," Pat replied, either missing or choosing to ignore the underlying message. "This woman raised the finest man I know and deserves all the celebration we can give her." As they settled around the table, Jessica unveiled the centerpiece of her efforts, a 3-layer vanilla cake adorned with delicate sugar flowers that must have taken hours to craft. The creation was undeniably beautiful, a testament to skills that seemed almost professional in their execution. "Jessica, this is absolutely stunning," Annabelle said, and meant it. Whatever else could be said about her daughter-in-law, the woman possessed genuine talent. "I started baking at 5 this morning," Jessica replied, her tone suggesting both dedication and subtle martyrdom. "I know how much you appreciate the traditional touches, and I wanted to honor that. Some people might go to a bakery, but I believe in doing things the old-fashioned way when it comes to family." The comment carried layers, a compliment to Annabelle's values, a demonstration of Jessica's own worthiness, and perhaps a gentle criticism of those who might choose convenience over effort. Annabelle caught it all, filing it away with the dozen other small observations she'd made throughout the afternoon. "How thoughtful," Annabelle replied evenly. "Robert always said that the love you put into something shows in the final result." At the mention of her late husband, the room fell into the brief, respectful pause that always accompanied his memory. Michael's face softened with the particular sadness that still surfaced when his father was mentioned unexpectedly. "He would have loved seeing all of us together like this," Michael said quietly. Jessica's hand found his across the table, a gesture of comfort that seemed both genuine and performative. "He's here with us in spirit. I'm sure he's looking down, so proud of the family he helped create." It was perfectly appropriate, exactly what someone should say in such a moment. Yet something in Jessica's delivery, perhaps the slight emphasis on family he helped create, as if Robert's primary achievement was producing Michael, made Annabelle's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. The conversation flowed through familiar channels as they shared the meal Jessica had prepared with the same meticulous care she brought to everything else. Each dish was perfectly seasoned, artfully presented, timed to arrive at exactly the right temperature. It was a performance of domestic competence that spoke to hours of planning and execution. "Jessica, you've really outdone yourself," Pat said, sampling the herb-crusted salmon. "This is restaurant quality." "Oh, it's nothing special," Jessica replied with practiced modesty. "Though I did have to adapt the recipe significantly. The original was quite ambitious for everyday cooking. I simplified it so it would be more accessible to people who might not have professional-grade equipment." Annabelle paused, her fork halfway to her mouth. The comment seemed directed at no one in particular, yet it managed to suggest that while Jessica possessed both the skills and equipment for ambitious cooking, others in the room might not. The implication hung in the air like smoke, invisible to some, unmistakable to others. "Adaptation is a valuable skill," Annabelle said mildly. "In nursing, we learn that the best solutions are often the simplest ones. Experience teaches you that complicated isn't always better." "Exactly," Jessica agreed brightly, missing, or choosing to miss, the gentle correction embedded in Annabelle's words. "Though I suppose some things are worth the extra effort when the occasion calls for it." The gifts followed dinner, each present carefully chosen and beautifully wrapped. Michael had selected a cashmere scarf in deep blue. Jessica contributed an ornate photo frame that would display a picture of the family, and Pat offered a small potted orchid that she'd grown herself. "I thought you might enjoy nurturing something beautiful," Pat said as Annabelle admired the delicate purple blooms. "Unlike some flowers, orchids require very specific care," Jessica observed, leaning forward to examine the plant. "They're quite particular about their environment. Too much attention can be just as harmful as too little." Again, the comment seemed to carry weight beyond its surface meaning. Annabelle found herself wondering if they were still discussing flowers. As the afternoon progressed toward evening, Jessica began the elaborate ritual of cake service. She insisted on cutting and plating each slice herself, arranging them with the same precision she brought to everything else. When she reached Annabelle's plate, she paused. "The birthday girl gets the largest piece, of course," Jessica announced, carving out a generous portion that included an extra sugar flower. "Age before beauty, as they say." She delivered the line with a laugh, as if it were merely playful teasing between family members. But Annabelle felt the bar beneath the humor. The suggestion that at 70, she had passed from beauty into some other category entirely. "How thoughtful," Annabelle replied, accepting the plate with the same grace she'd shown throughout the afternoon. "It's lovely when people remember that with age comes the wisdom to truly appreciate life's sweetness." The response was perfectly calibrated, accepting the gift while gently redirecting the implied insult. Jessica's smile flickered for just a moment, recognition passing across her features before the mask of perfect daughter-in-law slipped back into place. The cake itself was as delicious as it was beautiful, the vanilla layers light and perfectly moist, the buttercream frosting sweet without being cloying. Annabelle found herself genuinely impressed by Jessica's skill, even as she remained alert to the undercurrents flowing beneath the celebration. As the evening wound down and Pat prepared to leave, Annabelle felt the first stirrings of discomfort in her stomach. Nothing dramatic, just a gentle unease that she attributed to having eaten more than usual. She was 70 after all, and rich foods affected her differently than they once had. "Thank you all for such a lovely celebration," she said as they gathered in the foyer for final goodbyes. "It's been perfectly wonderful." "I'm so glad you enjoyed it," Jessica replied, her embrace lingering just a moment longer than necessary. "Family celebrations are so important, don't you think? They remind us what really matters." As the door closed behind her guests and Michael helped Jessica carry dishes to the kitchen, Annabelle remained in her living room, settling into Robert's old chair. The house felt suddenly quiet after the afternoon's activity, and she found herself reflecting on the celebration that had just concluded. On the surface, it had been everything a 70th birthday should be: elegant, thoughtful, filled with the people who mattered most. Jessica had orchestrated it with impressive skill, creating an afternoon that would photograph beautifully and provide warm memories for years to come. Yet Annabelle couldn't shake the feeling that she had been a prop in someone else's performance, the birthday girl in a celebration designed less to honor her than to showcase Jessica's capabilities as the perfect daughter-in-law. Every compliment had carried a subtle correction. Every gesture of care had been accompanied by a demonstration of superiority. The discomfort in her stomach intensified slightly, and she pressed her hand against her abdomen with mild concern. Perhaps the rich food had been too much after all. At her age, digestion became more unpredictable, another reminder of time's relentless passage. From the kitchen came the sounds of Michael and Jessica cleaning up, their voices a comfortable murmur of domestic cooperation. They were good together in many ways, Annabelle had to admit. Jessica brought sophistication and ambition that complemented Michael's steadier nature. If only there weren't these moments, these small, sharp observations disguised as care, that left Annabelle feeling as if she were being gradually diminished. She closed her eyes, thinking of Robert and how he might have handled the evening's subtle tensions. He had possessed an easy charm that could diffuse almost any situation, a gift for making people feel valued rather than judged. How differently this celebration might have unfolded with his gentle presence to smooth the sharp edges of family dynamics. The stirring in her stomach grew more insistent, and Annabelle realized that perhaps she should retire soon. Age brought wisdom, but it also brought the humbling reminder that the body operated by its own rules, independent of dignity or timing. The stirring in her stomach grew more insistent as Annabelle made her way upstairs, one hand trailing along the familiar banister that Robert had refinished 3 times during their marriage. The discomfort that had begun as a gentle unease during the final moments of her birthday celebration was rapidly intensifying into something far more concerning. By the time she reached her bedroom, waves of nausea were rolling through her with increasing frequency. She pressed her hand against her abdomen, trying to recall what she had eaten that might have disagreed with her. The salmon had been perfectly prepared, the vegetables fresh, the cake. Another wave hit, stronger this time, accompanied by cramping that made her gasp. This wasn't the gentle indigestion of an elderly woman who had overindulged. Her medical training, dormant but never forgotten, began cataloging symptoms with clinical precision. The onset was too rapid, too severe, too focused on her digestive system to be simple food poisoning. "Oh, God," she whispered, making it to her bathroom just as the first violent surge overwhelmed her body. What followed was an hour of humiliation so complete, so devastating, that Annabelle found herself sobbing between episodes of digestive distress that seemed designed to strip away every shred of dignity she possessed. Her body betrayed her with violent, uncontrollable waves that left her weak, shaking, and utterly helpless. At 70, she had endured the indignities that came with aging, the slower reflexes, the occasional memory lapses, the way younger people sometimes spoke to her as if she were a child. But this was different. This was her body turning against her in the most primitive, humiliating way possible, in the privacy of her own bathroom, where she could only grip the cool porcelain and wait for each wave to pass. Between episodes, her nurse's mind began working, despite her physical distress. The timing was too precise, too immediate. Food poisoning typically took hours to manifest, sometimes days. This had begun within an hour of eating, targeting her digestive system with surgical specificity. With trembling hands, she managed to call Michael's number, her voice barely steady enough to speak when he answered. "Mom? What's wrong?" His concern was immediate and genuine, the worry of a son who had already lost one parent and lived in fear of losing another. I'm quite ill, Michael," she managed between waves of nausea. "Something I ate, I think. Could you come?" "I'm on my way. Should I call an ambulance?" No. Just, please come." She heard him telling Jessica about the call, heard Jessica's voice in the background expressing concern and offering to come along. Of course she would want to come. Of course she would want to witness the results of her handiwork. They arrived within 20 minutes, Michael's face etched with worry as he knocked gently on the bathroom door. "Mom, can I come in?" "Just give me a moment," Annabelle called weakly, attempting to compose herself enough to face them. She splashed cold water on her face, noting how pale and drawn she looked in the mirror. Her birthday celebration dress was wrinkled and stained, her carefully styled hair disheveled. She looked exactly like what she was, a sick, elderly woman who had been reduced to her most basic, undignified state. When she emerged from the bathroom, Jessica was already in the bedroom, her face arranged in an expression of perfect concern. She had changed from her celebration dress into casual clothes, as if she had known she might be staying a while. "Oh, Mom, you look terrible," Jessica said, moving forward with apparent sympathy. "What happened? Was it something you ate?" The question was delivered with such innocent concern that anyone else might have missed the slight emphasis on the word ate, the way Jessica's eyes flickered with something that wasn't quite worry. "I don't know," Annabelle said weakly, allowing Michael to help her to the bed. "It came on so suddenly. So violently." "Food poisoning can be like that," Jessica said knowledgeably, "especially with rich foods. And at your age, your digestive system isn't as resilient as it once was." The salmon was quite rich, and that cake, well, it was a lot of butter and sugar for someone with a more mature system. Each word was chosen with surgical precision. The concern was perfectly appropriate, the explanations medically sound, the suggestions about age-related digestive issues delivered with just enough sympathy to mask their cruelty. But Annabelle heard it all. The subtle blame, the implications about her body's failure, the way Jessica positioned herself as the knowledgeable caregiver dealing with an elderly person's unfortunate limitations. "Should we call Dr. Harrison?" Michael asked, sitting on the edge of the bed and taking his mother's hand. "Let's see how she feels in a few hours," Jessica suggested. "These things often run their course. The important thing is to stay hydrated and rest. I could stay the night, make sure she's all right." The offer was delivered with perfect daughterly devotion, but Annabelle caught the glint in Jessica's eyes, the barely concealed satisfaction of someone watching their plan unfold exactly as intended. "That's very thoughtful," Annabelle managed, "but I think I'll be fine, just need to rest." "Are you sure?" Jessica pressed. "I hate the thought of you being alone when you're feeling so vulnerable." The word vulnerable hung in the air between them, loaded with meaning. Jessica wasn't offering comfort. She was savoring her victim's helplessness, drinking in the sight of the dignified Annabelle Jones reduced to weakness and humiliation. "I'm sure," Annabelle said firmly, her voice finding strength despite her physical distress. "I've been taking care of myself for quite some time." Michael squeezed her hand. "I'll check on you first thing in the morning. Call if you need anything at all." After they left, Annabelle lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling as the pieces fell into place with horrible clarity. The insistence that she have the largest piece of cake. Jessica's barely concealed smirks during the celebration. The way she had positioned herself to witness Annabelle's distress, to offer help that was really just another form of humiliation. It hadn't been food poisoning. It had been deliberate, calculated. Jessica had spent hours preparing that beautiful cake, crafting those delicate sugar flowers, timing everything perfectly for maximum impact. And she had made sure to be here to witness the results, to offer condescending comfort while watching her mother-in-law suffer. The realization hit Annabelle like a physical blow. This wasn't just a cruel prank. It was psychological warfare disguised as family celebration. Jessica had violated the most basic trust of hospitality, had turned Annabelle's own birthday into a weapon against her. As another wave of digestive distress sent her hurrying back to the bathroom, Annabelle felt something fundamental shift inside her. The humiliation was real, the physical distress undeniable, but beneath the weakness and indignity, something else was awakening. Something cold and purposeful that had been dormant for too long. For 40 years, she had been the calm, competent nurse who could read a situation with deadly accuracy. She had comforted grieving parents, had managed difficult doctors, had navigated hospital politics with skill that came from understanding human nature at its most raw and desperate. Jessica had made a critical error. She had assumed that age meant weakness, that dignity could be permanently shattered by one night of humiliation. She had underestimated the woman she was dealing with, mistaking grace for fragility, kindness for naivete. As Annabelle finally returned to her bed near dawn, exhausted but no longer broken, she began to think. Jessica wanted to play games with family trust? She wanted to use intimate knowledge to cause maximum damage? She wanted to demonstrate how easily she could reduce someone to their most vulnerable state? Very well. Annabelle had spent decades learning to read people, to understand their weaknesses, to know exactly where to apply pressure for maximum effect. She had been the one who held families together during their darkest moments, who knew which words could comfort and which could destroy. Jessica had chosen the wrong target. And now, as the morning light began to filter through her bedroom windows, Annabelle Jones began to plan her response. The birthday celebration was over, but the real education was just beginning. 3 days after her birthday, Annabelle sat at her kitchen table with a cup of chamomile tea and her laptop, the morning light casting familiar shadows across the same surface where she had endured her humiliation. Her body had recovered, but her mind remained sharp with purpose. She had spent the previous 2 days maintaining the facade of slow recovery, accepting Michael's concerned phone calls and Jessica's texts offering to bring soup. Each message of fake sympathy only strengthened her resolve. Now, alone in her house, she began her investigation with the methodical approach that had served her through 4 decades of nursing. First, she needed to understand exactly what had been done to her. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with surprising agility as she researched laxatives and their effects. The symptoms matched perfectly with magnesium-based compounds. Fast-acting, powerful, designed to cause maximum digestive distress within an hour of consumption. The kind of thing someone with Jessica's research skills could easily obtain and dose precisely. The cake. That beautiful, elaborate cake that Jessica had insisted on cutting herself, making sure Annabelle received the largest piece. The timing was too perfect, the targeting too specific to be anything but deliberate. Annabelle leaned back in her chair, remembering the celebration with new eyes. Jessica's barely concealed satisfaction, the way she had positioned herself to witness the aftermath. The condescending comments about age and digestive limitations that had felt rehearsed. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Through the kitchen window, she saw Pat Williams approaching with a covered dish. "Come in, it's open," Annabelle called, quickly closing her laptop. "Brought you some of my grandmother's chicken soup," Pat said, settling the dish on the counter. "Michael mentioned you were feeling poorly after your party. Much better now, thank you." Annabelle poured Pat a cup of tea, grateful for the company and the opportunity to test her theories. "Sit with me a moment." Pat studied her friend's face with the keen observation of someone who had raised 3 children and worked in social services. "You look like you're thinking hard about something." Annabelle chose her words carefully. "Pat, you were there for the entire celebration. Did anything strike you as odd?" "Odd how?" "About Jessica. Her behavior, her comments." Pat sipped her tea thoughtfully. "Well, she certainly worked hard to make everything perfect. Maybe a little too hard, if you ask me. All those comments about doing things the old-fashioned way and traditional touches, felt like she was making a point about something. What kind of point? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Like she was showing everyone how much better she could do things than whoever might have done them before. Pat's voice carried the careful diplomacy of someone who had learned when to speak directly and when to let implications hang in the air. Annabelle nodded slowly. And the cake cutting? When she insisted I have the largest piece? That struck me as odd, actually. She was very specific about it. Made sure everyone noticed how generous she was being to the birthday girl. Pat paused, her social worker instincts clearly engaged. Anna, what's this really about? For a moment, Annabelle considered confiding everything. Pat had been her closest friend through Robert's illness, the one person she trusted completely. But something held her back. Perhaps the need to be absolutely certain before making accusations that would shatter her family. Just trying to understand some things, she said finally. Jessica and I, we don't always see eye to eye. That woman has issues with boundaries, Pat said bluntly. The way she talks about you sometimes, like you're a project she's managing rather than Michael's mother. And those little digs disguised as compliments? I see right through that. The validation was comforting, but Annabelle needed more than impressions. She needed facts. After Pat left, she opened her laptop again and began researching Jessica's background with the thoroughness she had once applied to understanding rare childhood cancers. Social media profiles, professional networking sites, any digital footprint that might reveal inconsistencies. Jessica's LinkedIn profile painted the picture of a successful marketing executive with an impressive trajectory from a small Ohio firm to her current position in Brooklyn. But as Annabelle studied the timeline more carefully, she noticed gaps, periods where Jessica claimed to be freelancing or consulting that seemed conveniently vague. Her phone rang, Michael's name appearing on the screen. How are you feeling, Mom? Much better, sweetheart. Back to my normal self. Good, good. Jessica was worried you might have picked up some kind of bug. She mentioned that older adults can be more susceptible to foodborne illnesses. There it was again, the subtle implication of weakness, of age-related vulnerability, filtered through Michael's innocent concern. How thoughtful of her to worry, Annabelle said evenly. She seems very knowledgeable about health issues. She researches everything thoroughly. It's one of the things I love about her. She never does anything halfway. No, Annabelle thought. She certainly doesn't. Michael, tell me about how you two met again. I know it was at a work retreat, but I'd love to hear more details. For the next 10 minutes, she listened as Michael recounted their courtship, asking gentle questions that prompted him to share more about Jessica's background than he realized. Small details about her previous job, her family in Ohio, the stories she told about her past. After the call ended, Annabelle opened a notebook, the same kind she had used for patient care plans, and began writing down everything she knew about Jessica Miller Jones. Professional history, family background, the stories that didn't quite align, the gaps that needed explanation. She was building a case, though she wasn't yet sure what crime she was investigating. But her instincts, honed by decades of reading people in crisis, told her that someone who would poison an elderly woman's birthday cake as a joke was capable of far worse. The afternoon sun slanted lower through her kitchen windows as Annabelle worked, her laptop open, her notebook filling with observations and questions. For the first time since her birthday, she felt like herself again, not a victim, but a professional gathering information with deadly precision. Jessica had made the mistake of underestimating her opponent. She thought she was dealing with a frail elderly woman who could be humiliated into submission. She was about to learn the difference between age and wisdom, between vulnerability and strategy. Annabelle Jones was back to work, and this case would be her masterpiece. A week into her investigation, Annabelle had filled 3 pages of her notebook with inconsistencies in Jessica's stories. Employment gaps that didn't align with her polished resume. References to family wealth that contradicted Michael's casual mentions of Jessica's modest background. Small lies that individually meant nothing but collectively painted a picture of someone carefully constructing a false identity. The breakthrough came when she found Jessica's brother on Facebook. Danny Miller still lived in their hometown of Millbrook, Ohio, according to his profile. His photos showed a man in work clothes, often covered in grease, clearly comfortable with his blue-collar life. The contrast with Jessica's carefully curated online presence was stark, where she projected sophistication and success. Danny's posts revealed someone genuine and unpretentious. Annabelle stared at a photo of Danny standing next to a restored 1967 Mustang, his smile wide and unguarded. In the background, barely visible, was a woman who looked like a younger, less polished version of Jessica. The caption read, "Jessie helped with the paint job before she got too fancy for us. Jessie, not Jessica." And the comment about getting too fancy suggested a transformation that Danny didn't entirely approve of. After an hour of careful consideration, Annabelle picked up her phone and dialed the number listed on Danny's auto repair business page. "Miller's Garage, this is Danny." His voice carried the easy confidence of someone comfortable in his own skin, a sharp contrast to Jessica's calculated presentations. "Hello, Danny. My name is Annabelle Jones. I'm Jessica's mother-in-law." A pause. "Oh, hey there. Jesse's mentioned you." The use of that childhood nickname again, and something in his tone, caution, perhaps even discomfort. "I hope this isn't too forward, but I'm planning a surprise for Jessica and Michael, and I thought it might be nice to include some family memories. I was hoping you might have some stories or photos from when she was younger." "A surprise, huh?" Danny's voice carried new wariness. "What kind of surprise?" Annabelle had anticipated this question. "Nothing elaborate, just putting together some photos and memories for their anniversary. Jessica speaks so fondly of her childhood in Ohio." Danny's laugh was short and humorless. "Does she now? That's something." The response was loaded with meaning that Annabelle immediately cataloged. This wasn't the reaction of a brother who shared warm memories with his sister. "I get the feeling there might be some family tensions I'm not aware of," she said gently, using the voice that had encouraged countless worried parents to share their fears. "Look, Mrs. Jones." "Annabelle, please." "Annabelle, I don't know what Jessie's told you about our family, but I'm guessing it wasn't the whole truth. She's been reinventing herself since she left Ohio, creating this whole new identity that doesn't have much to do with where she came from." Annabelle felt her pulse quicken. "What do you mean by reinventing?" Another pause, longer this time. "She wasn't always Jessica Miller Jones, marketing executive. Back here she was just Jessie Miller, daughter of a drunk and a failure. But she was smart, I'll give her that. Smart enough to figure out how to become someone else entirely. That must have been difficult for her. Maybe, but it was more difficult for the people she stepped on getting there." Danny's voice hardened. "Look, I probably shouldn't be telling you this, but if you're family now, you should know what you're dealing with. Jessie left Ohio under complicated circumstances." Annabelle's notebook was already open, pen poised. "Complicated how?" "There was some trouble at her last job here. Some money went missing, and a coworker, a single mom with 2 kids, got blamed for it. Lost her job, couldn't find work anywhere in town, had to move away, start over somewhere else." The words hit Annabelle like ice water. "And Jessica?" "Jessie got promoted 2 weeks later. Funny how that worked out." Danny's bitterness was unmistakable. "She left for New York about a month after that, said she was quote, pursuing better opportunities. Never looked back." Annabelle's pen moved quickly across the page, recording every detail. "Do you remember the coworker's name?" "Sarah Hendricks. Sweet lady, worked there for 5 years before Jessie showed up. Never caused trouble, never had so much as a complaint against her." Danny's voice dropped. "I tried to keep in touch, make sure she was okay. Last I heard, she was working 2 part-time jobs in Cincinnati, still trying to rebuild her life." The pattern was emerging with horrible clarity. Jessie, had a history of destroying innocent people for her own advancement. Sarah Hendricks wasn't her first victim. Annabelle wouldn't be her last. "Danny, why are you telling me this?" A long silence. "Because Sarah Hendricks reminded me of you, in a way. good person who didn't see it coming until it was too late. And because... He paused. Because I've been waiting for years for someone to ask the right questions about my sister. You think she was responsible for the missing money? I know she was. Jessie always was good at making other people pay for her mistakes. The question is what she's been up to in New York, and whether anyone else is going to get hurt before someone figures out who she really is. After the call ended, Annabelle sat in her kitchen, staring at her notebook. The birthday cake poisoning suddenly seemed like part of a much larger pattern. Jessica didn't just enjoy humiliating people. She had a history of destroying lives when it served her purposes. But now Annabelle had what she needed: a name, a place, and most importantly, a pattern of behavior that would resonate with anyone who understood predatory personalities. She opened her laptop and began searching for Richard Thompson, the compliance officer Danny had mentioned, Jessica's former boss who had been deceived by her manipulation. If Sarah Hendricks had been blamed for Jessica's crime, then Richard Thompson had been the one who made the decision to fire an innocent woman. A man like that, who prided himself on integrity, would be haunted by the possibility that he had been manipulated into destroying an innocent life. A man like that would want the chance to set things right. Annabelle found his contact information within an hour. Richard Thompson, currently working for a financial compliance firm in Columbus, Ohio. His LinkedIn profile spoke of integrity, ethical business practices, and a commitment to protecting honest employees from corporate malfeasance. Perfect. She picked up her phone, her finger hovering over the numbers. One call could set everything in motion. One conversation could give Jessica a taste of the same destruction she had inflicted on others. But first, she needed to be absolutely sure she was ready for the consequences. Because once she made this call, there would be no going back. Jessica's carefully constructed life would begin to crumble, and Michael would be caught in the debris. Annabelle looked at the photo on her mantle. Robert smiling at their wedding, young and hopeful. He had always believed in fighting for what was right, even when it came at personal cost. She dialed the number. Annabelle sat in her kitchen for 20 minutes after dialing Richard Thompson's number, her finger hovering over the call button. The morning light streamed through her windows, illuminating the notebook filled with Jessica's lies, the laptop screen showing Thompson's professional profile, and the phone that would become her weapon. She thought of Sarah Hendricks, working 2 part-time jobs in Cincinnati, her life destroyed by Jessica's calculated cruelty. She thought of her own humiliation, planned and executed with the same cold precision. She thought of Michael, blissfully unaware that he was married to someone capable of such systematic destruction. Annabelle pressed call. Richard Thompson speaking. His voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to difficult conversations, with undertones of the wariness that came from years in compliance work. Mr. Thompson, my name is Annabelle Jones. I'm calling from Brooklyn about a former employee of yours, Jessica Miller, though she goes by Jessica Miller Jones now. A pause. She could almost hear him shifting mental gears, accessing memories he probably preferred to keep buried. Jessica Miller. That's a name I haven't heard in a while. May I ask what this is regarding? Annabelle had rehearsed this moment, understanding that her approach would determine everything that followed. Too aggressive, and he would shut down. Too vague, and he would dismiss her as a crank caller. She needed to position herself as someone he could trust while providing just enough information to awaken his own suspicions. Mr. Thompson, Jessica is my daughter-in-law. She's been married to my son for 3 years, and recently I've become concerned about some aspects of her character that don't align with the stories she's told our family. I see. His tone remained carefully neutral, but she detected interest beneath the professional caution. I understand you were her supervisor at Millbrook Financial Services. I'm hoping you might be able to help me understand her work history there, particularly the circumstances surrounding her departure. Another pause, longer this time. Mrs. Jones, personnel matters are confidential, and it's been several years since. Mr. Thompson, Annabelle interrupted gently. I'm not asking for confidential information. I'm asking for your professional opinion about someone who may be deceiving my family in ways that could cause serious harm. She let that hang in the air, knowing that a man who worked in compliance would understand the implications of fraud within family relationships. What specifically concerns you about her character? He asked finally. Annabelle chose her words with surgical precision. I've discovered some inconsistencies in the stories she's told about her past. Claims about her professional achievements that don't match public records. References to family circumstances that contradict information from other sources. Small things individually, but they form a pattern that suggests someone who is very comfortable with deception. I see. Thompson's voice had shifted subtly, becoming more engaged. And you're concerned about what this might mean for your son. Exactly. As her former supervisor, you would have had the opportunity to observe her work ethic, her interactions with colleagues, her integrity. The word integrity was carefully chosen. In her research, she had noted that Thompson's current firm specialized in ethical compliance, that his professional reputation was built on identifying and preventing fraud. Mrs. Jones, I appreciate your position, but I'm not comfortable discussing specific personnel matters from my previous employment. Annabelle had expected this response. Of course. I completely understand. Perhaps I could share what I've learned, and you could simply confirm whether my concerns are reasonable. She could hear him considering this, the compliance officer in him recognizing the careful structure of her request. I'm listening. Jessica has told our family that she left Millbrook Financial Services for a promotion in New York. However, I've learned from other sources that her departure coincided with the termination of a coworker named Sarah Hendricks for alleged financial irregularities. The silence that followed was deafening. She had hit her target. How do you know about Sarah Hendricks? His voice was tight now, professional caution warring with what sounded like old guilt. Jessica's brother mentioned the situation. He seemed to feel that Sarah had been treated unfairly. Danny Miller. Thompson's voice carried recognition and something else. Regret, perhaps. He tried to contact me about that case several times after Jessica left. Annabelle felt her pulse quicken. What did he want to discuss? Another long pause. She could hear Thompson wrestling with confidentiality constraints and his own conscience. Mrs. Jones, I'm going to tell you something that I probably shouldn't, but that I've regretted not saying for years. The Sarah Hendricks case always bothered me. She was a model employee for 5 years. Never a single issue with her accounts, never a complaint about her work. Then, suddenly, we discover discrepancies that seemed to point directly to her. But you had doubts. I had doubts from the beginning. The evidence was almost too neat, too. Convenient. But it was also compelling, and Jessica was very persuasive in presenting the case against Sarah. Annabelle's pen moved quickly across her notebook. Jessica presented the case. She was the one who discovered the discrepancies, brought them to my attention. She had documentation, explanations for how Sarah could have manipulated the accounts. It all seemed very thorough. Too thorough? In retrospect, yes. Jessica had only been with the company for 8 months, but she seemed to understand our systems better than people who had been there for years. She knew exactly where to look, exactly what evidence would be most damaging. The admission hung between them, years of suppressed doubt finally finding voice. Mr. Thompson, do you believe Sarah Hendricks was innocent? The silence stretched so long that Annabelle thought the call had dropped. Mrs. Jones, I've spent the last 4 years in compliance work, investigating financial fraud. In my professional opinion, based on what I know now about sophisticated embezzlement schemes, yes, I believe Sarah Hendricks was innocent. And I believe Jessica Miller orchestrated her downfall to cover her own theft. The words hit Annabelle like a physical blow, even though she had suspected as much. Hearing it confirmed by the man who had made the original decision gave it weight that transformed suspicion into certainty. Mr. Thompson, what would it take to reopen that investigation? New evidence. A credible reason to believe that the original conclusion was wrong. He paused. Mrs. Jones, may I ask why you're pursuing this? Annabelle considered her response carefully. Because I believe Jessica is still the same person she was in Ohio, still willing to destroy innocent people when it serves her purposes. And because I think she's planning to do it again. To your family? To anyone who gets in her way. Another silence then. Mrs. Jones, if you have specific evidence of current fraudulent activity, I need you to understand that I'm legally obligated to report it. I understand. But first, I need to know, if evidence emerged that Jessica was responsible for the original theft, would you be willing to take action to clear Sarah Hendricks's name? Without hesitation, Thompson said immediately, that woman's life was destroyed based on what I now believe was fabricated evidence. If I could undo that injustice, I would consider it a professional and moral obligation. Annabelle closed her eyes, feeling the weight of what she was about to set in motion. Mr. Thompson, I may have information that could help you do exactly that, but I need time to gather everything properly. May I call you back? Mrs. Jones, you have my direct number, and thank you for making this call. I've been carrying this guilt for 4 years. After hanging up, Annabelle sat in her kitchen, staring at the phone. She had just lit the fuse that would destroy Jessica's carefully constructed life. Within days, possibly hours, Jessica's current employer would receive inquiries about her background. Her fraud would be exposed, her career destroyed, her marriage to Michael irreparably damaged. But Sarah Hendricks would finally have justice, and no one else would suffer what Annabelle had endured on her birthday. The phone felt heavy in her hands as she realized there was no turning back. The weapon was armed, the target acquired. All that remained was to watch Jessica's world burn. 3 days after her call to Richard Thompson, Annabelle was pruning her roses when she heard the front door of Jessica and Michael's brownstone slam with unusual force. Through her kitchen window, she watched Jessica pace frantically across her living room, phone pressed to her ear, her normally composed demeanor completely shattered. The roses could wait. Annabelle moved to her front porch with a watering can, positioning herself where she could observe without appearing to spy. Years of managing hospital politics had taught her the value of strategic positioning during moments of crisis. Jessica emerged from her house 20 minutes later, her face blotchy with tears, her hands shaking as she fumbled with her car keys. She looked like someone whose carefully constructed world had just collapsed around her. Annabelle felt a cold satisfaction settle in her chest. It was beginning. That evening, Michael called, his voice tight with worry. "Mom, something's happened at Jessica's work. She came home today saying she'd been fired." "Fired?" Annabelle arranged her voice to convey appropriate shock and concern. "What on earth for?" "She won't give me details. Says there were some questions about her background, some kind of investigation. She's been crying all afternoon, talking about how unfair it is, how someone must have set her up." Someone did, Annabelle thought. Someone who understood exactly how to apply pressure where it would do the most damage. "That's terrible, Michael. Did she say what kind of questions?" "Something about her previous employment." Background checks, references that didn't pan out. "Mom, she's talking like someone deliberately sabotaged her." The paranoia was setting in faster than Annabelle had expected. Jessica's mind was already jumping to conspiracy theories, searching for enemies who might have orchestrated her downfall. Good. Paranoid people made mistakes. "I'm sure it's just some kind of misunderstanding," Annabelle said gently. "These things often get resolved once the facts come to light." But Jessica's facts wouldn't bear scrutiny, and they both knew it. The next morning, Annabelle was reading in her garden when Jessica appeared at her gate, her face haggard, her usual polished appearance replaced by the disheveled look of someone who hadn't slept. "Annabelle, I need to talk to you." "Of course, dear, come in." Jessica's movements were jerky, agitated, as she followed Annabelle into the kitchen. She declined the offer of tea, instead pacing near the window like a caged animal. "Someone's trying to destroy me," Jessica said without preamble. "Someone who knows things about my past, things that have been taken out of context and twisted." Annabelle settled into her chair with calm deliberation. "What kind of things?" "Questions about my time in Ohio. My previous job. There was an incident there, a misunderstanding about some financial discrepancies, and now someone's dredging it all up and making it sound like I was responsible." The way Jessica framed it was masterful, acknowledging the existence of the scandal while positioning herself as the victim of misunderstanding rather than the perpetrator of fraud. Even in crisis, she was spinning the narrative. "That sounds very stressful," Annabelle said mildly. "Who would want to hurt you like that?" Jessica's eyes narrowed, and for a moment her mask slipped completely. "I think you know." The accusation hung in the air between them, electric with barely contained fury. Annabelle met Jessica's gaze with the steady calm of someone who had faced down difficult doctors, grieving parents, and hospital administrators for 4 decades. "I'm afraid I don't understand." "Don't you?" Jessica's voice rose, desperation bleeding through her anger. "Ever since your birthday party, you've been different. Watching me, asking questions about my background. And now, suddenly, my past is being investigated?" Annabelle allowed herself a small smile. "Jessica, I'm a 72-year-old retired nurse. I hardly have the resources or connections to orchestrate some kind of professional investigation. But you have friends, contacts, people you've worked with over the years." The paranoia was deepening, spinning out into conspiracy theories that would make Jessica seem increasingly unstable to anyone who witnessed them. Annabelle had seen this pattern before. People in crisis often became their own worst enemies, saying and doing things that undermine their credibility. "I think you're giving me far too much credit," Annabelle said gently. "Perhaps you should focus on clearing up these misunderstandings rather than looking for someone to blame." Jessica's composure cracked completely. "You don't understand what this means. I've worked for years to build my career, my reputation. Everything I've accomplished, everything I've built, it's all falling apart. I'm sure if you're innocent, the truth will come out." The word innocent hit Jessica like a physical blow. Her face went white, then flushed with rage. "You think I'm guilty, don't you? You've always thought I wasn't good enough for your precious son. Well, let me tell you something about your perfect family. Jessica." Annabelle's voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to stopping dangerous situations before they escalated. "I think you should go home and discuss this with Michael when you're calmer." "Don't tell me what I should do?" Jessica's voice cracked with hysteria. "You have no idea what I've been through, what I've had to overcome to get where I am. People like you, with your comfortable lives and your judgmental attitudes, you have no right." She stopped herself, perhaps realizing how unhinged she sounded, how completely she was validating every negative impression Annabelle might have formed. "I know what you did," Jessica said finally, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "I don't know how, but I know you're behind this. And I won't let you destroy my marriage." "I would never want to hurt Michael," Annabelle replied truthfully. "He's my son and I love him. But you hate me." Annabelle considered the accusation carefully. Did she hate Jessica? Or did she simply see her clearly for what she was? A predator who had finally encountered someone willing to fight back. "I don't hate you, Jessica, but I do think Michael deserves to know who he's married to." The words landed with devastating precision. Jessica's face went through a series of expressions: rage, fear, calculation, before settling into something cold and dangerous. "If you think you can turn my husband against me, you're wrong. Michael loves me. He believes in me. And when I tell him that his bitter old mother is trying to destroy our marriage out of jealousy and spite, he'll choose me." It was a threat, but also a revelation. Jessica believed she could manipulate Michael's loyalties, could frame this confrontation as an attack from a jealous mother-in-law rather than the exposure of her own crimes. "Perhaps," Annabelle said calmly. "But truth has a way of emerging, doesn't it? Especially when people start looking carefully at the facts." Jessica stared at her for a long moment, and Annabelle could see her processing the implications. The investigation into her background wouldn't stop with her current job. Once questions were raised, they would spread like ripples in a pond, reaching every aspect of her carefully constructed life. "This isn't over," Jessica said finally. "No," Annabelle agreed quietly. "I don't think it is." After Jessica left, Annabelle sat in her kitchen, feeling the weight of what she had set in motion. The confrontation had confirmed everything she suspected about Jessica's character: the willingness to attack when cornered, the assumption that she could manipulate Michael's emotions, the complete absence of remorse for her past crimes. But it had also revealed something else. Jessica was already unraveling. making the kind of desperate accusations that would undermine her credibility with Michael. The investigation Annabelle had triggered would do its work, but Jessica's own paranoia and desperation would accelerate her downfall. The phone rang, Michael's name on the caller ID. "Mom, we need to talk." Michael arrived 20 minutes later, his face drawn with exhaustion and confusion. Annabelle watched through her window as he sat in his car for several minutes before approaching her door, clearly struggling with whatever Jessica had told him. "Come in, sweetheart," she said before he could knock. He entered slowly, his usual easy demeanor replaced by the careful tension of someone navigating a minefield. "Mom, Jessica says you've been asking questions about her background, that you might be behind what happened at her job." Annabelle settled into her chair, noting how Michael remained standing, positioned near the door as if he might need to escape quickly. "What exactly did she tell you?" "That you've been investigating her, contacting people from her past. She thinks you're trying to sabotage her career because you don't approve of our marriage." The accusation was precisely what Annabelle had expected, yet hearing it from Michael's lips still stung. She had anticipated this moment, but the reality of her son questioning her motives felt like a physical blow. "And what do you think, Michael?" He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture she remembered from his childhood when he was wrestling with difficult decisions. "I don't know what to think. Jessica's been fired from a job she loved, she's talking about lawyers and investigations, and now she's saying her own mother-in-law is behind it all." "Sit down," Annabelle said gently. "Let me tell you what I've actually been doing." Michael remained standing, his body language defensive. "I'm listening." "I've been concerned about Jessica's character. Not because I disapprove of your marriage, but because I've observed behaviors that worry me. Small inconsistencies in her stories, attitudes toward others that seemed unkind." "Unkind how?" Annabelle chose her words carefully. "The way she speaks about people, Michael. The subtle put-downs disguised as concern. The way she positions herself as superior to others. Everyone has flaws, Mom. That doesn't justify." "On my birthday," Annabelle interrupted quietly, "Jessica poisoned my cake." The words hung in the air like smoke from an explosion. Michael's face went through a series of expressions: disbelief, confusion, anger. "What are you talking about?" "She put something in my cake that made me violently ill. Deliberately. As some kind of cruel joke. Michael shook his head. "That's insane. Jessica would never." "She would. And she did." Annabelle's voice remained steady, clinical. The onset was too fast and too targeted to be accidental. And her behavior afterward, the way she enjoyed witnessing my distress, confirmed it. Michael began pacing, his agitation increasing. "Even if that were true, and I'm not saying it is, that doesn't give you the right to destroy her career." "I didn't destroy her career, Michael. I simply made some phone calls to verify information she had given our family. What her employers did with that information was their decision. You contacted people from her past. Quote, I spoke with her brother Danny. And yes, I spoke with someone from her previous job. Someone who had always had doubts about a case that destroyed an innocent woman's life." Michael stopped pacing. "What case?" "A coworker named Sarah Hendricks was fired for embezzlement that Jessica committed. Sarah lost everything: her job, her reputation, her ability to support her children. She had to start over in another city, working multiple minimum wage jobs to survive. Jessica told me about that situation. She said there was someone at her old job who was caught stealing. Yes, that's exactly what she would say. Just like she would say that an elderly woman's violent illness was just age-related digestive problems." The parallel hit Michael visibly. For the first time since entering the house, he looked truly uncertain. "Mom, this is..." He sat down heavily. "This is my wife you're talking about." "I know, and I'm sorry." They sat in silence for several minutes, the weight of accusation and implication settling between them. Finally, Michael spoke. "What evidence do you have? About any of this?" "Regarding the cake? Only my medical knowledge and the suspicious timing. Regarding Sarah Hendricks, the testimony of Jessica's former supervisor, who has spent 4 years regretting his decision to fire an innocent woman. Her former supervisor talked to you? He talked to me because he's been carrying guilt about that case. Because Jessica presented evidence that was too convenient, too perfectly crafted. Because he now believes he was manipulated into destroying someone's life. Michael's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his face tightening. Jessica, she wants to know where I am, what we're talking about. What are you going to tell her? I don't know. His voice cracked slightly. Mom, if what you're saying is true, if Jessica really did these things, what does that make me? What kind of person am I that I married someone capable of this? The anguish in his voice broke Annabelle's heart. This was the cost of justice. Watching her son confront the possibility that his marriage was built on deception and cruelty. It makes you human, Michael. It makes you someone who believed the best about the person you loved. But I should have seen it. The signs, the inconsistencies you're talking about, I should have noticed. People like Jessica are experts at manipulation. They show different faces to different people. The person she is with you may be genuine in some ways. Michael's phone buzzed again. Then again. She's getting worried, he said, staring at the screen. What will you do? I need to think. He stood up abruptly. I need to talk to her, ask her directly about these things. Annabelle felt a chill of concern. Michael, be careful. If she realizes that you're questioning her, if she feels cornered. She's my wife, Mom. Whatever else she might be, she's my wife. I owe her the chance to explain. After he left, Annabelle sat in her quiet house, feeling the weight of forces now beyond her control. She had lit the fuse, revealed the truth, set the investigation in motion. But the final confrontation between Michael and Jessica would happen without her guidance or protection. Her phone rang. Pat Williams. Anna, I just saw Michael leaving your house. He looked terrible. And I've been hearing rumors about Jessica losing her job. What's going on? Come over, Pat. It's time I told you everything. As she waited for her friend, Annabelle realized that the private war between her and Jessica was about to become very public. The family fractures were spreading, and soon everyone would have to choose sides. The only question was whether the truth would be enough to save her son from the wreckage of his marriage. Pat arrived as the sun was setting, carrying a bottle of wine and wearing the expression of someone preparing for battle. She had known Annabelle long enough to recognize when her friend was operating in crisis mode. Tell me, Pat said simply, settling into the kitchen chair that had become her usual spot during difficult conversations. Annabelle began with the birthday cake, describing every detail of that humiliating night and her growing certainty that Jessica had deliberately poisoned her. Pat listened without interruption, her face growing darker with each revelation. That evil little... Pat caught herself. Sorry. Continue. The story unfolded methodically. Danny Miller's revelations about Jessica's past, the investigation into Sarah Hendricks, Richard Thompson's guilt-ridden admissions, and finally, the phone call that had set Jessica's professional destruction in motion. When Annabelle finished, Pat sat in silence for a long moment, processing the scope of Jessica's cruelty and the calculated nature of Annabelle's response. You orchestrated her entire downfall, Pat said finally. I exposed the truth about who she really is. Anna, I've known you for 15 years. I've seen you handle dying children, grief-stricken parents, impossible doctors. I've never seen you be cruel. This isn't cruelty, Pat. This is justice. Is it? Or is it revenge wrapped in the language of righteousness? The question hit harder than Annabelle had expected. She had spent weeks justifying her actions, framing them as protection for future victims, as justice for Sarah Hendricks. But Pat's challenge forced her to examine her deeper motivations. She humiliated me in my own home, Annabelle said quietly. She turned my birthday into a weapon against me, then watched me suffer while pretending to care. And now you've destroyed her life. I've revealed who she really is. What happens next is the consequence of her own choices. Before Pat could respond, shouting erupted from the direction of Michael and Jessica's house. Both women moved to the window, watching as their argument spilled onto the front steps. "Lying to me for 3 years." Michael's voice carried clearly across the small distance between the houses. "Your mother has poisoned you against me." Jessica's response was shrill, desperate. "She's jealous of what we have, jealous that you chose me over her. This isn't about my mother. This is about Sarah Hendricks. This is about the embezzlement you covered up by destroying an innocent woman." Even from a distance, they could see Jessica's body language change, the defensive posture of someone whose lies had finally been exposed. That woman was guilty. The evidence proved. What evidence, Jessica? The evidence you manufactured? The case you built against someone who trusted you. Pat gripped Annabelle's arm. "We should intervene. This is getting out of hand." "No," Annabelle said firmly. "This confrontation has been years in the making. Michael needs to see who he married." Jessica's voice rose to near hysteria. "You're choosing her over me. Your bitter, manipulative mother over your own wife." "I'm choosing the truth," Michael shot back. "For the first time in our marriage, I'm asking for the actual truth." The argument continued for another 10 minutes, Jessica cycling through denial, accusation, and finally desperate attempts at manipulation. She accused Annabelle of orchestrating a conspiracy, claimed Michael was having a breakdown, threatened to leave and never come back. Finally, the front door slammed, and Jessica emerged with 2 suitcases, throwing them into her car with violent movements. Michael stood on the steps, his shoulders slumped in defeat, watching his marriage literally drive away. After Jessica's car disappeared around the corner, Michael remained on the steps for several minutes before walking slowly toward Annabelle's house. "He's coming here," Pat observed. "Yes. What are you going to say to him?" "The truth. That I am sorry his marriage is over, but glad he's finally free." Michael entered without knocking, his face ravaged by the confrontation. He looked like someone who had aged years in the span of hours. "She admitted it," he said without preamble. "Not directly, but when I pressed her about Sarah Hendricks, about the evidence against her, Jessica couldn't explain how she knew so much about the embezzlement, how she had access to information that should have been restricted." He sank into a chair, his hands shaking. "And when I asked about your birthday cake, about whether she could have put something in it, she didn't deny it. She just kept saying it was harmless, that it was supposed to be funny." "Oh, Michael," Pat said gently. "She said you deserved it, Mom, that you needed to be knocked down a peg, that you acted like you were better than her." His voice cracked. She called it a reality check for an old woman who didn't know her place. The words hung in the air like poison, revealing the depth of Jessica's contempt for the woman who had welcomed her into the family. "I'm sorry you had to hear that," Annabelle said quietly. Are you really sorry?" Michael's voice carried an edge of anger that surprised both women. "Because part of me thinks you orchestrated this whole thing knowing exactly how it would end." Annabelle met his gaze steadily. "Yes, I orchestrated Jessica's exposure. And yes, I knew it would likely destroy your marriage. But Michael, I need you to understand something. Your marriage was already destroyed. It was built on lies from the beginning. Jessica married the image of you, not the reality. She wanted your respectability, your family connections, your potential for advancement. She never loved you. She loved what you could do for her. How can you know that? Because people like Jessica don't love, sweetheart. They acquire, they collect, they use." Annabelle's voice softened. "You deserved better than someone who saw you as a prize to be won rather than a person to be cherished." Michael was quiet for a long time, processing the wreckage of his life. Finally, he spoke. "What happens now? Jessica says she's going to fight this, that she's going to hire lawyers and prove she was set up." "Let her try," Annabelle said calmly. "The truth doesn't change just because someone refuses to accept it." "And us? Our family? How do we move forward from this?" Annabelle reached across the table and took her son's hand. "We heal. We rebuild. We remember that family isn't just about blood. It's about people who choose to love and protect each other, even when it's difficult." Pat nodded approvingly. "And we make sure this never happens again, that no one else gets hurt by someone like Jessica." As the three of them sat in the gathering darkness, Annabelle felt a complex mixture of satisfaction and sorrow. Jessica's reign of manipulation was over, her capacity for future harm neutralized. Sarah Hendricks would finally get justice. Michael would be free to find genuine love, and no other family would suffer what theirs had endured. But the cost had been enormous. A marriage destroyed, a family fractured, a son forced to confront the ugly reality of his choices. Still, as she looked at Michael, really looked at him, she could see something that hadn't been there for years. Clarity, strength, the beginnings of the man he could become when he was no longer under Jessica's influence. It was a start. And sometimes, Annabelle reflected, that was enough. 2 weeks after Jessica's explosive departure, the full scope of the consequences began to unfold like ripples from a stone thrown into still water. Annabelle sat in her kitchen reading the morning news when her phone rang, Richard Thompson's name on the caller ID. "Mrs. Jones, I wanted to update you on the investigation." His voice carried a mixture of professional satisfaction and personal relief that she had come to recognize in their subsequent conversations. The forensic accountants finished their review of the Millbrook financial case. Jessica Miller's theft was far more extensive than we originally suspected, nearly $40,000 over 8 months. She had created an elaborate system of false entries and misdirected payments that she blamed on Sarah Hendricks. Annabelle closed her eyes, absorbing the magnitude of Jessica's crime. And Sarah will be fully exonerated. We're also discussing compensation for the damages to her career and reputation. It won't undo 4 years of struggling, but it's a start. What about Jessica? That's more complicated. The statute of limitations has expired on the original theft, but her current employers have filed charges related to resume fraud and providing false references. She's facing potential prison time. After the call ended, Annabelle found herself staring out her kitchen window at the empty house next door. Michael had moved back in temporarily after Jessica's departure, but the space felt hollow, haunted by the ghost of a marriage built on lies. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Father Marcus Sullivan stood on her doorstep, his clerical collar a reminder of the moral complexities that had driven him to seek her out. "Annabelle, may I come in?" She had been expecting this visit. In a neighborhood as tight-knit as theirs, news of dramatic family breakups traveled quickly, especially when they involved potential criminal activity. "Of course, Father. Tea? Please." They settled into the familiar rhythm of hospitality, but Annabelle could feel the weight of his unspoken concerns. "Michael came to see me," Father Sullivan said finally. "He's struggling with what happened. Not just with Jessica's deception, but with his own role in enabling it." "And what did you tell him?" "That forgiveness of others and ourselves is often the hardest work we do." Father Sullivan studied her face carefully. "But I'm not here about Michael's spiritual journey. I'm here about yours." Annabelle set down her teacup with deliberate precision. "I'm listening." "You orchestrated Jessica's destruction with surgical precision. Used your knowledge, your connections, your understanding of human nature to systematically dismantle her life. The question I'm wrestling with, the question I think you should be wrestling with, is whether that was an act of justice or vengeance. Does the distinction matter if the outcome serves the greater good? It matters to your soul, Annabelle, and it matters to how you'll live with the choices you've made." The conversation they were dancing around finally found its center. Annabelle had spent weeks justifying her actions, framing them in terms of protection and justice. But late at night, in the quiet hours when honesty became unavoidable, she faced the darker truth. "She humiliated me," Annabelle said quietly. "In my own home, on my birthday, she reduced me to something pathetic and helpless. And she enjoyed it. And that justified destroying her life? That justified exposing who she really was. The destruction was a consequence of her own choices." Father Sullivan leaned forward. "Annabelle, I've known you for decades. I officiated at your wedding, buried your husband, watched you raise Michael with grace and wisdom. This calculated campaign of exposure, it doesn't match the woman I know. Maybe you didn't know me as well as you thought, or maybe grief and betrayal changed you in ways you haven't fully acknowledged." The words hit with unexpected force. Annabelle found herself thinking about Robert. about the months of watching him slowly die, about the gradual way Jessica had begun to marginalize her after his death. How much of her response to the birthday incident had been about the cake, and how much about years of accumulated loss and diminishment? Father, what would you have had me do? Accept the humiliation? Allow her to continue victimizing people? I would have had you seek justice through proper channels. Report the poisoning to authorities. Share your concerns about Jessica's character with Michael directly. Fight her behavior without becoming something you're not. And if those proper channels failed? If Michael refused to listen? If Jessica continued to hurt people? Then you would have done what you could and trusted in divine justice. Annabelle laughed, but there was no humor in it. Divine justice doesn't help Sarah Hendricks feed her children. It doesn't stop Jessica from finding new victims. But human justice administered through vengeance corrupts the one seeking it. They sat in silence for several minutes, the moral complexity of her choices settling between them like sediment in still water. What's done is done, Annabelle said finally. Jessica's crimes have been exposed, Michael is free of her manipulation, and Sarah Hendricks will get the vindication she deserves. If the cost is my own moral standing, perhaps that's a price worth paying. Is it? Because Michael will need his mother's guidance as he rebuilds his life. He'll need someone he can trust to be motivated by love rather than vengeance. The challenge struck home. In her focus on destroying Jessica, had she compromised her ability to help her son heal? Before she could respond, Michael's voice called from the front door. Mom? Father Sullivan? I saw your car outside. In the kitchen, she called back. Michael entered, looking better than he had in weeks. Still tired, still processing, but no longer carrying the weight of unconscious deception. He had lost 15 pounds and gained a clarity of expression that made him look younger despite his ordeal. I've been thinking about what we discussed, he said to Father Sullivan. About forgiveness and moving forward. And, quote, I think I'm ready to start counseling. To understand how I missed so many warning signs, how I can avoid making the same mistakes. Father Sullivan smiled approvingly. That's wisdom, Michael. But first, I need to understand something. Michael turned to his mother. Mom, when you made that phone call to Richard Thompson, did you know it would end my marriage? The directness of the question caught Annabelle off guard. In all their conversations since Jessica's departure, they had danced around this central issue. Yes, she said simply. I knew that exposing Jessica's past would likely destroy your relationship with her. And you did it anyway. I did it because your marriage was already destroying you, piece by piece. Jessica didn't love you, Michael. She was using you. And eventually, she would have discarded you when something better came along. Michael nodded slowly. I know that now. I can see it when I look back. How she isolated me from friends, how she made me doubt my own perceptions, how she positioned herself as the victim whenever I questioned anything. Then you understand why I couldn't stand by and watch. I understand the why. What I'm struggling with is the how, the calculation of it. The way you manipulated the situation to achieve the outcome you wanted. Annabelle felt something shift inside her, a recognition that her son had grown beyond the need for her protection and into someone capable of holding her accountable. You're right to struggle with that, she said. I became something I didn't recognize, something Robert wouldn't have recognized. But something that was necessary, Michael said quietly. I hate that it was necessary, but Jessica would never have been stopped any other way. The three of them sat together as the afternoon light faded, each grappling with the moral complexity of choices made in crisis, of justice pursued through imperfect means, of love expressed through actions that carried their own terrible costs. Finally, Father Sullivan spoke. Redemption isn't about the perfection of our choices. It's about what we do with the consequences of our imperfection. Annabelle looked at her son, seeing in his face the man he was becoming, stronger, wiser, more cautious but not broken. Whatever moral compromises she had made, whatever darkness she had embraced, it had freed him to become himself. Perhaps that was enough. Perhaps that was everything. 6 months later, Annabelle stood in her kitchen on a crisp October morning, preparing for another birthday, her 71st. This time, there would be no elaborate celebration, no carefully orchestrated performance. Just Pat Williams, Michael, and perhaps Father Sullivan, if his schedule allowed. The house next door remained empty. Michael had moved to a smaller apartment in Park Slope, part of his process of rebuilding his life without the shadows of his failed marriage. The brownstone stood as a reminder of dreams that had been built on deception, now quietly listed for sale. A knock at the door interrupted her preparations. Through the window, she saw an unfamiliar woman, mid-30s, brown hair, wearing the slightly worn clothing of someone who worked hard for modest wages. "Mrs. Jones? I'm Sarah Hendricks." The name hit Annabelle like an electric shock. The woman whose life had been destroyed, whose vindication had become the moral center of everything that followed, stood on her doorstep, holding a small wrapped package. "Sarah, please, come in." They moved to the kitchen, the space where so much of the drama had unfolded, where Annabelle had planned her campaign of exposure, where she had received the phone calls that confirmed Jessica's destruction. Sarah Hendricks was smaller than Annabelle had imagined, with the quiet strength of someone who had survived betrayal and rebuilding. Her eyes held no anger, only a profound weariness that spoke of years spent proving her worth after having it systematically destroyed. "I wanted to thank you," Sarah said simply. "Richard Thompson told me what you did, how you connected the pieces that cleared my name." Annabelle studied the woman before her, seeing in her face the cost of Jessica's cruelty. "How are you, really?" Quote, Sarah's smile was complicated. "Better. The financial settlement helped. I was able to pay off debts, get some stability for my kids. But more than that, people finally know the truth. My professional reputation has been restored. And personally, that's harder to rebuild. Trust doesn't come easily after something like that. When someone can destroy your life so completely, so systematically, it changes how you see the world." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, two women who had been victims of the same predator, connected by an experience neither had sought. "May I ask you something?" Sarah said finally. "Of course. When you made that phone call to Richard Thompson, when you set everything in motion, what was driving you? Was it really about justice for me? Or was it about revenge for what she did to you?" The question Annabelle had been avoiding for months, asked with gentle directness by the person most entitled to an answer. "Honestly, it started as revenge, pure and simple. Jessica humiliated me, and I wanted to destroy her for it." Annabelle paused, choosing her words carefully. "But when I learned about you, about what she had done to your life, it became something more complex. Your suffering gave my anger a moral framework. And now, looking back, now I think revenge and justice aren't always as different as we pretend they are. Sometimes the desire for personal satisfaction aligns with the need for broader accountability." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "I've struggled with that too. Part of me is grateful that Jessica finally faced consequences, but part of me wonders if I would have made the same choices you did, if I would have been capable of that level of calculation." "I hope you never have to find out." Sarah reached for the package she had brought. "This is for you. A birthday gift, though I know it's early." Inside was a small ceramic bowl, handmade, simple but beautiful. At the bottom, in delicate script, were the words, "For the courage to seek truth." "I make pottery now," Sarah explained. "Started after everything fell apart. There's something therapeutic about creating something beautiful from raw clay, about the process of firing that makes fragile things strong." Annabelle turned the bowl in her hands, feeling its weight, its imperfect perfection. "It's beautiful. Richard Thompson told me you're a retired nurse, that you spent your career caring for sick children and their families. 40 years. That means you know about healing, about the difference between treatment that hurts but helps, and harm that serves no purpose." Sarah met Annabelle's eyes. "What you did to Jessica, it was painful, but it served a purpose. It stopped her from hurting others. That's not revenge, Mrs. Jones. That's surgery." The metaphor resonated deeply. How many times had Annabelle held a child's hand during painful procedures? explaining that sometimes healing required temporary hurt. How many parents had she comforted while doctors cut into their children's bodies to save their lives? "Thank you," Annabelle said quietly, "for understanding, for forgiving." Quote, "There's nothing to forgive. You gave me my life back." After Sarah left, Annabelle sat alone in her kitchen, holding the ceramic bowl and reflecting on the strange turns her life had taken. A year ago, she had been a dignified widow enjoying her retirement, proud of her son's marriage, secure in her role as family matriarch. Now she was something different. A woman who had learned the difference between dignity and effectiveness, between turning the other cheek and protecting the innocent. She had discovered capabilities within herself that she hadn't known existed, had crossed moral lines she had never imagined crossing. Her phone rang. Michael. "Happy early birthday, Mom. How are you feeling about tomorrow?" "Peaceful," she said, and realized it was true. "Good. I'll be there around 2, and Pat's bringing her famous apple pie." "Perfect. Mom, I've been thinking about something." "Yes?" "I'm grateful. For what you did, how you handled everything. I know it cost you something. I know you had to become someone you didn't want to be. But you saved me from a life that would have destroyed me eventually." Annabelle felt tears prick her eyes. "You would have figured it out eventually. Maybe, but probably not before she did irreparable damage. To me, to other people she would have hurt." Michael paused. "I love you, Mom. All of you, including the parts that were capable of bringing down someone like Jessica." After hanging up, Annabelle sat with Sarah's bowl in her hands, thinking about the year that had passed. Jessica was facing prosecution in Ohio, her career destroyed, her carefully constructed identity in ruins. Richard Thompson had found peace in finally correcting his mistake. Sarah Hendricks was rebuilding her life with dignity restored. Michael was in therapy, growing stronger, learning to trust his own instincts again. And Annabelle? She had learned that sometimes love required terrible choices, that protection sometimes demanded destruction, that justice and revenge could wear the same face depending on who was looking. Tomorrow she would turn 71, surrounded by people who knew her completely, her capacity for grace and her willingness to wage war when necessary. She would serve cake from the bakery, would accept gifts and good wishes, would celebrate another year of survival in a world that didn't always reward kindness. But tonight, in the quiet of her kitchen, she allowed herself to remember the woman she had been before Jessica Miller Jones poisoned her birthday cake. That woman had been gentler, perhaps, more trusting, less aware of her own capacity for calculated destruction. She missed that woman sometimes. But she didn't regret her evolution. Because sometimes, Annabelle had learned, the most loving thing you could do was refuse to be a victim. Sometimes the most moral choice was to ensure that predators faced consequences for their actions. Sometimes justice required a grandmother to become something harder, sharper, more dangerous than anyone expected. She set Sarah's bowl on her counter, where it would catch the morning light. A reminder that beautiful things could emerge from fire, that strength came from surviving heat that would destroy lesser materials. Tomorrow would be her birthday. And this time, she would be the one in control of every slice. The last slice would be hers to give. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us. Quote.